Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of Smack Talk with Sandhu. And I tell you something, my guest this week is precisely why I launched my own show. I've only had a chance to speak to my guest this week in the odd media scrum here or there, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I've never really had an extended sit-down conversation with him. He is one of the nicest guys in the sport. He is one of the most professional athletes, not just in MMA, but in all of combat sports. He is not done by any means, and he's got a big couple of years ahead of him, I feel, in my gut. It's my pleasure to introduce the legend, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Stephen, how are you, my friend?
Doing great. I like the legend. Brought me in as the legend. I appreciate it, my friend.
You are a legend because look at your combat sports history in kickboxing and MMA. You've carried yourself with absolute dignity and respect. And I feel like that, means that in my book, at least, you are a legend. And here's where I'd like to start, Stephen. And I don't know how many people know this story, but I did a little digging around, did a little research. September 1994, UFC 3 in Charlotte, North Carolina. You correct me if I'm wrong on this. A 12-year-old Stephen Wonderboy Thompson attended his very first UFC event. Is that correct?
You are correct. My dad took me to Charlotte, North Carolina. I think it was at the Grady Cole Center, which is pretty crazy because my dad had his very first kickboxing fight in the 70s at the Grady Cole Center. And it was one of those things at the time that was kind of underground, UFC, pay-per-view. It was kind of, people weren't really sure what they thought about it at that point. It was, people were talking about how gruesome it was. There's a small community of people who just loved it, right? My dad was always been a big advocate on, growing up in a karate background, but learning the grappling, learning the wrestling. And at that time, it was literally style versus style, right? And now MMA is its own thing, but it was just the coolest thing. I told my dad then that I was going to do this one day.
That's wild. So did you know that you were about to go to a cage fighting event or like when you get in the car with your dad, like where did you think you were going, or did you actually know what you were heading into that night?
No. So I remember as a kid, my dad used to referee kickboxing fights, tough man competitions, kickboxing fights. So I thought it was just another one of those, my dad would go up there, referee, and me and my brothers and sister would be running around the venue, going crazy. But I didn't know it was an actual UFC event. I just thought it was another fight he was going to referee, but he was a spectator. And I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I mean, you had Chemo coming out with a big cross on his back to the cage. These guys are fighting bare knuckle. Some ninjutsu guy ended up winning it because Gracie couldn't come back out because he was too injured. He ended up winning the fight, but he was so injured he couldn't come back out and finish. And it was just so cool, man. It was just something you'd never seen. We were always grew up as a family around the TV watching boxing fights. So that's kind of what brought us together, watching kickboxing, watching combative sports. And it was just one of those, but that's something I've never seen before. And it always intrigued me.
If the Stephen of 2023 could go back in time in the DeLorean and speak to 12-year-old Stephen and say, hey, based upon your experience that night, the seed is going to be planted. At some point, you're going to actually fight in the UFC and you're going to fight on big shows and headline events and be on pay-per-view cards. And what would that conversation be like?
Man, to be honest with you, I don't think I would say a thing. Because if I did, maybe that would trigger something in my head not to do it or stray somewhere else, or like me doing this. Are you kidding me? No way. Because then it wouldn't happen. You know what I mean? Just thinking, Back to the Future sense, you know what I mean? If I say something, it could change my mind. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's been many times growing up where I didn't want to do the martial arts. I wanted to quit. Did not want to go train. I mean, it was mandatory in our household growing up, the martial arts. My dad, opened up his school in 1983 in Simpsonville, got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. And it was mandatory in our household that we had to train. It was just as important as our education. And, I had to do karate class twice a week. I had to do jiu-jitsu class twice a week. And I had to do kickboxing class twice a week. I had to get all those in. And if I didn't get those classes in, I'd be in trouble. and then get my homework in on top of that. So it was kind of one of those things where, you know, as a kid, for a little while there, I just didn't want to do it. But once I kind of realized that I had no say-so in it, you know, it just became my life. It just became every day. Like I knew nothing else but train and compete. Of course, in those days, I competed in karate tournaments, and I started my full contact training actually at the age of 12, because I kept getting disqualified actually in karate tournaments, kept hitting too hard. And, you know, that's when I started my full contact training at 12 years old. Did I know that I was going to be in the UFC? I don't think so. But I think just the full contact and just the competitive aspect of the game is what intrigued me and something that I fell in love with. So, and at the time, kickboxing was actually a lot more popular than MMA. MMA
Right.
was still kind of underground. So that's what I kind of put everything into. I put the jiu-jitsu on the back burner, focused on the kickboxing. I get people ask me all the time, you know, would you go back and change anything? And I don't think I would, because I wouldn't be the fighter I am today if it wasn't just for that kickboxing, you know, experience. And to be honest with you, people told me, you know, have told me I'm kind of one of the last, I guess, specialists out there.
Mm.
But whenever I came into the UFC, you had, you know, Damian Maia, strictly just a grappler. You had Anderson Silva, who was good everywhere, but he was known for his striking, you know, and you still had you had those specialists out there. And nowadays, just everybody's just coming in just sick everywhere. You know?
Yeah, you're right. I feel like it's few and far between. The only one that comes to mind recently is maybe Alex Pereira, right?
Exactly.
Where he came from a strictly kickboxing background, had very few MMA fights, and then just got thrust right into the UFC only because Israel had been cleaning out the middleweight division.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of how the UFC was with me. You know, I was 5-0. I couldn't go back amateur. Once you start, you know, you turn pro in a fight sport, you have to continue to go pro all the way, you know, whatever sport it is, kickboxing, boxing, MMA. So I couldn't go back amateur. I was already pro kickboxing. So, and I was kind of thrust out there, literally trying to learn the wrestling and jiu-jitsu as I kind of went along. I was 5-0, and then UFC called in 2012. And I was actually getting ready to turn it down because I felt like I wasn't ready. Those guys, you know, you had Roy McDonald, you had George St. Pierre, solid wrestler who I was training with at the time, and he was just throwing me around like a little rag doll. I just felt like I wasn't ready. But my dad said, you know, could be your only chance. I mean, UFC probably never call again. This is it. You might as well go out there and make the best of it. And I did. I just went out there and trying to learn, and still learning as much as I can about, you know, the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu. At the same time, still trying to better my striking as well. And it was funny because after my second fight in the UFC, I got out wrestled by Matt Brown. So everybody's like, you know, Stephen's got no wrestling, blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of upset because I was working really hard on my wrestling. You just didn't see it. So my third fight, I fought a guy named Nishan Burrell, and I out wrestled him. You know, I took him down every round, controlled him up against the cage, and it wasn't the most exciting fight. Let's just say that. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the fight, I go to the back, doing the interviews and things like that. And one of the matchmakers, what was his name? He's not with the UFC anymore. But he
Joe Silva?
Yes, Joe Silva. And he said, Stephen, awesome win. But just remember, it wasn't your wrestling that got you here. So I'm like, all right, picking up what you're putting down. So I kind of just used the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu to keep the fight standing, right? Where I'm most exciting, where people want to see me. And yeah, man, I've just been along for the ride ever since.
10 plus years in the UFC. If you could, you know, the highs and lows, how would you evaluate and reflect upon the experience of competing for the number one promotion and against the absolute best and elite competition the sport has to offer?
Man, it has been the coolest experience of my life. Not just fighting, obviously, fighting some of the best fighters in the world. Like, that just sounds like that comes out from like a fantasy book or an anime. I mean, who can say they fought the best fighters in the world, right? I can. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, the fight game is part of my life. Like that's always going to be there. I always learn from a win or a loss. But I think what I remember the most is the people that I met, the people that I've trained with, the people that I've become really good friends with through the fight game. You know, GSP, one of my good buddies, Rashad Evans, who I just saw recently. I've got to train with Anderson Silva, Lyoto Machida. You know, I got to train with Ryan Hall, Gordon Ryan. I've got to train with, Chris Weidman, helping him through the rankings at 185, becoming champ. And there were long-lasting relationships that I've had through the fight game is what it's about, man. Those long-lasting relationships, even after the fight game, that I have now through fighting with the UFC, and the people that I've had a positive influence on through the fight game.
The fact that you've been in the UFC for so long, I felt like going into the Kevin Holland fight last December, your back was against the wall because a few results didn't go your way. And then you are involved in my opinion, and I think most people would agree, one of the fights of the year. You get the result, you're back in the win column. Now looking back at that particular performance, you know, going through the fire like you did with Kevin Holland, what was that experience like? Because I don't feel like that's the kind of fight we typically see you in. Yes, you've been in wars before, but something felt different about that Kevin Holland fight, especially at this stage of your career.
What was going through my mind is this is the fight that I've been wanting, right? These are the kind of fights that people want to see. The two previous fights before the Kevin Holland fight, obviously fighting some of the best guys, you know, Bilal Muhammad, you know, Gilbert Burns, and who I could have easily turned down, but I didn't, you know. Obviously wanted to test myself, but didn't get the win. But what I think disappointed me the most out of that fight was I wasn't able to show the fans what I'm capable of and the excitement which brings people to the fight game, what people want to see. I wasn't able to do that. You know, my opponents were very intelligent when it came to beating me, you know, taking me down, holding me down. There wasn't really a whole lot going on. And I think, whenever I fight, yes, I want to go out there and give it my all, but I also want to put on a good show for the fans. I want them to keep coming back, right? If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have a job. So going out there, I knew that Kevin Holland was going to be the best dance partner for sure. He's going to go out there and give it all he's got. He's going to try to keep the fight standing. I knew at some point he was going to shoot, but I knew it was going to be an exciting fight. And that's what people want to see. And I think that's what brings the best out of me are those type of fights. I mean, it was the Vicente Luque fight, right? It was the Jeff Neal fight that was, and we all got fight of the night. We all got the fight of the night bonuses. And of course, the Kevin Holland fight. I want to be exciting. And I think that's what brought the best out of me, knowing the fact that he was going to go out there and give it all and bring the best out of me. Not just, I knew the fight was going to stay standing. I knew I could defend off the takedown to keep the fight standing. And he knew it too. And yeah, man, it was epic. Like I can go out there and obviously me knock him out or him knock me out is what people want to see. And I knew that could happen at any point because he's that good. I mean, just watched him his last fight. He still had a hurt hand and still knocked out Ponzinibbio.
Yeah.
He, his bread and butter was his right hand. That shows how good he is. He's still out there and finished him, even though his hand was still injured. I'm like, wow. I mean, he's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, not just on the performance, but also on the result. I know how good that must have felt to get your hand raised in victory after a while. There's two things that I want to noodle on quickly on that fight. The first is the way the fight ended. We don't typically in MMA see a corner stoppage, the corner throwing in the towel. And I'd love to kind of get your perspective on perhaps why we don't see enough of that, and perhaps should we see more of that from corners protecting their fighters in the cage?
Yeah, that was a big thing, especially coming up in the kickboxing world. Like, especially when you had, standing 8 counts that are involved and you're getting knocked down and allowing your opponent to get back up to their feet. That could be very dangerous. People say boxing is more dangerous than MMA. And I agree when it comes to taking headshots. Sometimes you don't get that 3 knockdown rule. Sometimes you do. You get knocked down. That could be a concussion. They allow you to continue. In MMA, it's not like that. So very rarely do you get that. If you get hurt, normally there's going to be a finish. But sometimes you get a guy out there, for instance, for a good example, the Tony Ferguson fight. I forgot who he fought, but it was, I was literally yelling at the TV for the referee to stop it. When you're standing out there and you're bloody, you're battered, and you're shaking your head, like trying to wake yourself up, like, all right, guys, that's enough. I think there should be a rule where your cornerman is allowed to do so, is allowed to throw in the towel. Because us fighters, we're not going to give up. We're not going to quit.
Right. Yeah.
We're not going to go out there. It's like me and my dad, even me saying that, me and my dad have this unwritten rule, this unwritten thing that we have, like, we're not going to throw in the towel. Like, either I'm going to come back with my shield or I'm going to come back on it. Kind of the old Spartan, mentality, like, don't ever throw in the towel for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your coaches are there to make sure that your safety first, that you're able to fight and live, and be able to have a normal conversation with your grandkids as you get older. And I think that's something. So during that fight, it wasn't actually the corner who actually threw in the towel. It was Kevin Holland saying, take my gloves off. Like, I'm done. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And obviously the corner was like, okay, the fight's over. But it was more Kevin Holland saying that. But I think there should be a rule where maybe, or somebody out there, maybe it's not your corner man, but somebody there on the side ready to throw in the towel if they think they're taking too much punishment. Right. And maybe that could be too controversial, but you've got to take care of each other, man. We got to take care of you. I know so many fighters out there right now who slur their words when they talk, take too much punishment out there, or not allowing them. So they retire and then come back when they shouldn't be back, and they're just taking punishment, man. That's something that I told my dad, either I'll do this as long as my body will let me, or when my dad says I'm done. If he thinks, and he knows me more than I know myself at this point, I will continue to fight forever. But I know in my head, if my dad says I'm done, he sees something in me or out there in the fight that I'm taking too much punishment now and I need to stop. And that's when I'm done. That's what I'm going to call it a day. He knows me more. And to have somebody in your corner or in your training camp or somebody close to you that you respect that can tell you that to your face. We have a lot of yes men around us nowadays. Right. A lot of fighters have a lot of yes men, and they will just tell you what you want to hear and not take care of you. So I think we need more of those guys, more of the guys that will tell you like it is. You're done, man. Stop.
I agree. Amen. Speaking of punishment, during that fight, you broke your hand, and it's not the first time you've broken your hand. Were you just like, dang it, here we go again. I've got to now recuperate and get surgery. Like, what was that like for you to go through that again?
Yeah. So I didn't realize it was hurt till I took my wrap off. My dad has a very good wrap. He does a very good wrap job. It's funny because when my dad wrapped my hands, there's a lot of guys back there watching him. They're studying my dad wrapping my hands, and they're like, man, that is a sick wrap. And it's solid, man. It's got one of the best hand wraps out there. And I didn't know it was broken until after they took the wrap off, And I think I injured it again because I ended up breaking my hand against Vicente Luque years ago, a few years back. And they say once you break your hand, you're prone to do it again. Even though I do, for years, I've done a lot of hand conditioning. But Vicente Luque, man, he's got a melon on him. He's got a massive, just Neanderthal skull, just hard head, known for his granite head. I ended up breaking my hand, both of my hands. I felt that. I felt those during the fight. But this last fight, didn't realize it. After the fight was over, we took the hand wraps off, and I made a fist. I'm like, oof, that feels familiar. I ended up breaking the first and second metacarpal, so I didn't need any surgery. Just a little bit of time. I had it in a splint for a few weeks, and then that was it. But Kevin, I think you might have saw the shot that broke his hand.
Mm-hmm.
He hit me in the forehead, made my ears ring. My ears were ringing and ended up recovering. But that's the shot that did it. And I think he felt it. But once I started aiming for that hand, I think he knew that it was just over. But it was terrible break, man. I saw he sent me actually the x-rays of it. Oh my gosh, it was bad. And it wasn't like a month ago he had the pins taken out, and he fought last weekend.
That's wild.
The guy is a nut, man. I love him to death, but golly, there's no way I would have taken that fight. Like, nah, man, make sure my hand's nice and ready, but he'll take any fight. He's the type of guy 1,000 or 2,000 years ago fighting in the Coliseum. Like, that's Kevin Holland. You know what I mean? He's fighting lions. He's fighting tigers. That's the kind of guy he is.
And he's mouthing off at the same time.
Exactly. It was funny because during that fight, I think coming out of the second round, I was trying to pick the pace up, and he was like, "Hey man, slow down." I'm like, "Nah, I'm picking it up. And I think I back in the, after the fight, we watched the fight, and he goes back in the corner. He's like, "Man, that old fart is like fast, man." He didn't say fart. He said something else, but still, I thought it was a fun. I'm not that old, man. I'm only 40. Come on, man.
Hilarious. I was watching one of your old interviews from 2022, and I feel like it's Mystic Wonderboy predicts these things, because you said that you wanted to fight Kevin Holland, right? And then you said that you wanted to fight Michel Pereira. So the Kevin Holland fight is done and dusted. You've kind of checked that box, and it looks like all roads are now leading to UFC 289 in Vancouver on June 10th against Michel Pereira. What is it about Michel Pereira that got your juices flowing? And also, more importantly, you're ranked number 7. Michel Pereira is ranked behind you, right? And a lot of guys in your position wouldn't take opponents that are either not ranked or ranked behind you. They're kind of usually looking forward. So what was it about this fight that made sense to you?
Well, this isn't the first time that I've actually fought guys, ranked significantly behind me, like, pretty far back. But, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for those guys at the time, the Jake Ellenbergers, the Johnny Hendricks, the Rory McDonalds, who gave me that opportunity, right? To work their way up. There's a lot of guys that just hold on to their one spot so hard, and they won't fight anybody behind them. They only want to fight guys ranked above them. But you gotta give those guys an opportunity as well. And at the same time, if you do defeat those guys, then you deserve to be there, right? That's your spot. And then, but in my mind, going back and letting these guys work their way up, right? Test themselves up against you, also tests me and lets me know what I need to work on, or it pushes me mentally, physically, emotionally. Because if you fight in the UFC, you're freaking good. Doesn't matter where you're ranked. Anybody has the opportunity to finish you, and that's kind of how I see it, And but I think what's more important is giving these guys an opportunity to test themselves up against a top ranked guy. And if they beat me, then they deserve to be there. Take it. But there's a lot of guys ranked above me who are holding on so tight to their spot. It doesn't look good in the fans' eyes, and especially in the UFC's eyes. You should be taking on those up and comers. Now, if it's a guy that I've never heard of, maybe there have been times where I've turned guys down. I was ranked number 1, and they wanted me to fight a guy named Darren Till. I'm like, I don't even know who Darren Till is. At the time, I didn't. He wasn't even ranked, I don't think. But I gave him the opportunity. I said no, obviously, a few times, and they're like, well, we'll renegotiate your contracts. I'm like, oh, okay. But Michel, man, if you've ever seen this guy fight, that's another fight of the year right there.
He's a wild man. Yeah.
Man, he's cutting flips. He's running across the cage. He's got karate background as well. He's a big welterweight, but he's exciting to watch. And I think that just makes sense. Like, who would not want to watch that fight, right? Who wouldn't want to watch that fight? Those are the fights that intrigue me the most. Those are the fights that get me excited, right? Not the guys who are going to lay there on you and be the most boring fight ever. Like, nobody wants to see that. And I don't think that's a good use for my talent as well, for the UFC. They want to see the best fights, and I can give them that with guys like Kevin Holland. I can give those exciting fights where guys are standing up in their seats, applauding at the end of the fight with the Michel Pereiras, the Vicente Luques, the Jeff Neals. Now, those aren't the guys that I would love to fight. I wish everybody was like that, but I'm not going to turn them down if they give me a Gilbert Burns or whatever. But they just excite me, man. I know that we're going to put on a show. We're going to put on a show.
And also, it's not the first time you'll be fighting in Canada. You fought in Ottawa and Toronto. Do you enjoy fighting north of the border?
Oh, I love it, man. That's for the longest, that was my home away from home. Spent a lot of time in Canada. A lot of time in Toronto and Montreal. It was kind of my home away from home. I got a lot of fans in Canada. So to be able to go back, and I was wondering when the next time I would go back and fight in Canada will be again. But Vancouver, beautiful place. I've been to Vancouver as a guest fighter. Actually, I don't know if you guys saw it, but I think it was Vancouver when me and Kamaru Usman had like a little dance competition outside. I don't know if you saw that. That was in Vancouver. Beautiful place. And I got to train the cast of the Green Arrow there as well. That's where they filmed the Green Arrow. So really cool. I'm excited to go back and be able to perform in front of the Canadian fans. So yeah, man, June 10th is the plan. I haven't signed any contracts yet, so it's kind of up in the air, but that's the plan.
That's the plan. Let me ask you a question. What does Randy Couture, Glover Teixeira, and Daniel Cormier all have in common?
Were they champions over 40?
Bingo. They were all champions. They were all UFC champions in their 40s. And I feel like you get past Michel Pereira, you could be the first 40-year-old UFC champion in a lower weight class, because it's always harder. The lower the weight class you go, it's one of those things. It's perhaps, quote unquote, easier as a light heavyweight or a heavyweight to win a championship the older you get. But I would imagine that is still the numero uno goal for you, is to become UFC welterweight champion, right?
Always. And I think after a great win, obviously with Kevin Holland, and a great win over Michel Pereira, not taking anything away from these guys, but a good win over these guys, I get another shot at somebody in the top 5, and then maybe a Leon. I think Leon wants to fight another striker. I mean, he's turning Colby Covington down. I know Dana White's saying he's going to fight him, but he's turning Colby Covington down. And the top 5 it's a murderer's row of grapplers. Yeah. Right. And Leon actually gives me inspiration because he's predominantly a striker. He's very good at wrestling. I mean, you got to be good in order to take Kamaru Usman down, somebody who's never been taken down, and controlled to be able to defend the takedown, to keep the fight standing. So he inspires me to keep pushing forward. But I think Leon wants a striker as well. So he doesn't want to fight till October is what I've been told. I fight, Michel Pereira, good fight over that. And you never know, man. The UFC wants to see good fights. It would be kind of unfair, but to be able to jump those guys and be able to fight for the title would be sick.
Well, that was a great segue for my next question. I feel like there's a growing trend of fighters that are in that kind of like on the cusp of fighting for a title that are perhaps happy to be a backup fighter. Colby was supposed to be the backup fighter in London, and now he's getting the next shot. Gilbert has said, hey, for Leon's next fight, I'll be the backup fighter. What do you think about that? Would that be something that you would consider as being a backup fighter if that guarantees you the next shot? Is that something that you'd be interested in?
100%, man. 100%. Like I said, the strap is the number one goal. Strap is the number one goal. Actually, I would say it's the number 2 goal, because I like to fight, right? And I think fighting, especially in my sport, my goal is to be the best that I can be, right? Every day. I train, I work, I fight, but to be the best self that you can be every day. So I think that's the number one goal, is to try to, how far can I go? How much better can I get? I think with that mindset, keeps you humble and keeps your cup, half full, or keeps an empty cup, and strives for you to improve every day. Because when we start thinking that we're as good as we're going to get, we start losing the mindset to go into train. We start slacking a little bit. You know what I mean? So I think with that mindset, it keeps me pushing forward. In that way, it makes it easier to get to that title. So
you recently turned 40 years old, right? I'm going to be turning 40 years old later on this year. If there's someone out there watching this that's a teenager or perhaps in their early 20s, and this doesn't have to be, fight or combat sports related, if there's one piece of advice that you'd want to pass on to someone that is a lot younger than us, what would that be? Some bit of life advice.
Well, number one, and I tell this to everybody, like, if you want to be the best at whatever craft that it is, it could be being a garbage man. It could be being a professor. It could be, could be anything. It could be a professional sport. If you want to be the best at what you do, you have to be comfortable with the grind. You have to be. And I see this every day, still in my parents every day, beating the bushes every day, building the school up. I see this in professional athletes. I've trained with a lot of champions. It doesn't matter if they're sick, not feeling good, their honey broke up with them, they're feeling a little down. They're always in training. There's always something that you can do to better yourself, to improve, to get better, to make that step. That, because right now we're here. The goal is to be up here, right? The top. But every day you go in and you get comfortable with being uncomfortable and grinding it out, that you keep moving forward. You keep getting better, right? I see these champions that I've trained with, they don't take days off. They could be injured, but there's always something they can do in the gym. And at the same time, there's more people out there, and I think that's why they're champions. There's more people out there making excuses why they can't come in, right? They listen to that little voice in their head. Oh, I'm not feeling good. I'm not going to go in today. And they listen to it and they do it. They stay home. But it's the ones that are, like I said, that are comfortable with the grind and that are comfortable with being uncomfortable. Those are the guys that are successful. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that make it, that become the best. I mean, look at Michael Jordan, one of the best. People say the GOAT of basketball. Yeah. How many times was he in the gym, or how many times did he take days off? Probably never. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you got to be comfortable with the grind, and you got to learn to love it. There are so many days where I don't want to go in and work, that I don't want to go in and train, but I'm so used to defeating that person in my head and doing it anyway. And once you give into that person, that thing in your head telling you not to go, once you give into that, it makes it so much easier every time.
Man, I feel like I could run through a wall right now. Like you could easily be a motivational speaker, my friend. It kind of leans into a lot of the content that I see on your YouTube channel. And by the way, congrats. You're like on the cusp of 500,000 subscribers, Wonderboy MMA. Can I just ask you about that journey? Because I feel like a lot of fighters still haven't perhaps leaned into the opportunities, while you're at the top of your game, while you're in the UFC or on a big show or a big promotion, to leverage your social media and create content so that you can build something for your life post your combative career. The channel's great. You've got breakdowns, you've got technique skills, you've got previews, reviews, you've got it all there. What inspired you to start the channel, and what's that journey been like for you?
Well, me and my brother Tony Sweet, we call him Sweet T. We've had this idea for years now. We never really pulled the trigger because we didn't know how to go about it. We were just nervous to go out there and get started. And it's kind of the same mindset as people coming in to train. The hardest thing to do is just stepping on the mat. So the hardest thing for us was just doing it.
Right.
And we had a lot of fans in my social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, who've always wanted me to break down techniques and learn about my style. And we never really had a platform to do that. Right. So we found out about the YouTube, and at the time, there was a few guys that were doing the YouTube thing, but they weren't very consistent. Like Tyron Woodley had his camp, Donald Cerrone had some videos that he would post every 3 or 4 months. And so finally, me and Sweet T, my brother, were just like, what, let's do it. Let's buy a camera. Let's start out with just doing a Technique Tuesday, and let's get a schedule going. And Tony had no idea how to edit anything or how to promote it, or it's just something that we just we winged it, really. And that's what people love to see, where you started from and where you are now.
Right.
So we have those videos of where we started, where the editing was crap, me talking to the camera was terrible. I'm stuttering, but it's something that we just did for the fun of it. And we loved it. Not only that, but the fans loved it. We didn't know it was going to blow up like we did. It blew up instantly. We got to 100,000 within like less than a year. And we've had our ups and our downs, and there are videos that we thought were just going to crush it, and they do terrible. And there are videos that we thought, they're not going to do so good, and they blow up with over 1 million views. And it's like, dude, like there's no figuring this out. We just got to do it and just have fun with it. And that's what we're doing, man. We have Technique Tuesdays. I have fighter breakdowns. I have there's a lot of things that we do just for the fun of it. We did Fruit Ninja one that we cater to all ages, from kids all the way up to adults to fight fans. And it's just fun, man. We're having a blast with it.
Well, as someone that works in social media, people don't realize how much work goes into the back end of YouTube and to hack the algorithm, thumbnails and tags and all the admin on YouTube. And so a tip of the cap to you, because it's buttoned up, it looks premium. And like I said, almost 500,000 subscribers, which is just an incredible feat in itself.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier on that, you've trained with champions, and one specific double champion that you spent some time with recently was with Conor McGregor in Las Vegas during the TUF tapings. How did that come about? How did you two cross paths? I know you guys are a part of the same management agency, Paradigm, but in terms of actually spending some time together on site in Las Vegas, how did that all come about for you?
Well, I was out there in Vegas doing a Jose Cuervo commercial with Kevin Holland, who's one of the big sponsors of the UFC. And I was out there. We went to the PI, hung out there. I got a little workout in, and that's where they were filming the TUF show. So ended up meeting my manager. Obviously, me and Conor have bumped into each other many, many, many times, and very nice guy. And I was literally that Tuesday getting ready to go home. We were having lunch with one of my managers with Paradigm, and we were getting ready to go to the airport, and got a call from Conor saying he wanted me to be a guest coach. So I was like, are you kidding me? Let's go. Like, this is an opportunity I can't turn down. So ended up staying an extra 3 or 4 days, just being a guest coach out there for his team, which was just awesome. You know what I mean? It was really cool. And I think one of the workouts, I actually did the workout. Conor taught it, and I did the workout with the guys, which was a lot of fun. I mean, he's inspires his team, man. He's 100% in with his teams every step of the way, which I love, because that's what I do for a living. I teach for a living, but to be able to see him with the compassion for those guys and want to see them win, he puts everything into his guys. And I love that, man. I love that.
Did you get a sense that he's got motivation, fire in the belly, the hunger to really kind of make a big comeback in the UFC?
Oh yeah. I can see it every time that he talks. Every punch that he threw, it was like he was swinging at somebody. You know what I mean? Like, you could see it in him. And it's funny because when you take time off like that, and you're a guy like him who has been at the top of the game for a long time, not just in the fight game, but in business, you have that urge to compete, right? You have that fire in you, that flame, and you see it rekindled in him. I'm excited to see him fight again for sure.
How did you see that fight with him and Chandler go down?
Oh man, dude. I mean, if Conor McGregor, I was looking at his fist. He's got freaking mittens on that. He's got huge freaking mitts as hands. Like, you put that on your dome piece anywhere, you're going out, which is why it almost seems very easy when he hits you with that left hand, guys drop. No wonder when you got like mitts like his. He's got bigger hands than I do. It's ridiculous, man. So yeah, man, it's going to be a sick fight for sure.
People kind of miss him, utilizing that karate stance, right? He kind of morphed from a karate stance, light on his feet, to more of a boxing stance in recent fights. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you'd like to see him return back to? Is kind of like that karate stance, the kind of like the performance he put on against Aldo, where he's very light and hoppy on his feet?
Yes, actually. I mean, that's kind of where he lived for the longest, and where he did his best. When he kind of got in that boxer's mentality, obviously training for the Mayweather fight, kind of got in that boxer stance, lost his movement. And I think that's what made him good, was his movement, was that karate stance, that movement, that in and out, that getting his guys to bait to feint and then attack. That's where he lived. But yes, I think he gets back to that. He's gonna obviously be successful.
And speaking of karate, you are also involved with Karate Kombat. If I'm not mistaken, you are a sensei. I haven't seen any of the shows, but I've seen tons of clips on social media. I love the kind of pit and the camera angles that they can get with the combatants, like competing, is something that you just don't see in other sports, in other combat sports. How did that come about? How did you get involved with Karate Kombat? What is your role? What does that entail? And what is the ceiling for a show and a promotion like Karate Kombat, in your opinion?
Well, it's definitely, Karate Kombat, when you think of MMA and karate, people think of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, right? So it was just a perfect fit for me. You had Lyoto Machida, you have GSP as another sensei, you have Boss Rudin as another sensei. And then it's at the time when growing up, like us karatekas, we didn't have a professional sport to go into, specifically karate. We had to go into MMA or kickboxing, right? Or point fighting as well. But now you got guys who can make a living fighting full contact karate, right? We never had this. This is the first time in our history that we've had something like this. So it's huge, man. It's very exciting. The pit alone is really cool. You got guys, running off the side of the wall, picking dudes up and slamming them off the wall. It's really exciting. But I'm known as a sensei where I break down fights. I break down techniques. I also am involved with a lot of the fighters there and helping these guys improve their skill set, coming from a guy that has been there, right? Who's been fighting in front of the big show for a long time and in front of people and had that experience. To be able to pass that down to these guys is just awesome. So it's growing, man. And it is really exciting. I don't know if you've ever watched it. You can watch it on karate.com for free. It's just amazing. Somebody's getting knocked out in Karate Kombat. So fun.
Yeah, there's always these viral clips that I see on Twitter or Instagram. Like, I think that's one of the things that you're almost guaranteed in Karate Kombat, right? A final few things, and I really appreciate the time. We had some massive news recently where Jake Paul is going to be boxing Nate Diaz. Can I just, obviously Nate Diaz he's one of our guys. He's an MMA guy. He's like one of the biggest superstars, one of the biggest icons and legends in the game. Your reaction to that being his first boxing fight outside of leaving the UFC, and how do you think that fight goes down? Man, to be honest with you, Nate Diaz he's got good hands, but he's not a boxer, right? He's not known as just a pure boxer. And it's really nice to be able to see Jake and Logan Paul. They're very intelligent with who they fight, right? The big names, but they're never guys that are solely focused on the striking aspect. I don't think you'll ever see Jake Paul fight somebody like me, right? Anderson Silva's no better striker, but he's 43, 44 now? Mm-hmm. The reactions aren't the same at that point. He's still one of the best. I think he's very, very good fighter, but they picked their guys very well, man. And Jake, fighting these guys, he's improving in his boxing skills every day. You gotta tip your hat to these guys. They come from Vine. They got really popular on Vine when Vine was a thing. Then YouTube. They were YouTubers, and now they're professional athletes, man. It's crazy to be able to see the progression that these guys take. But I would love to see Nate win this fight, but I just don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. I think Jake has solidified himself as a professional athlete. He looked great his last fight. Even though he lost it, I think he did really well against a professional boxer. The cardio was good. The guys train like a real athlete. So you got to tip their hats off to the guys. And they're making money. Yep. They're making mad money. So I don't know. I think Jake's got it. Well, one thing's for sure, we're going to be tuning in because that's one of the biggest fights in combat sports on the calendar in 2023. Stephen, the thing that I like to do to finish all of my conversations, finish all of my interviews, is something I like to call the bit for social. And it's something different every single week. So for you, what I'd like to do is build the perfect MMA fighter based on 5 different disciplines. So we're going to go for boxing, leg kicks, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and fight IQ. Okay. So first of all, best boxing.
So I got to pick a fighter?
Pick a fighter in each of these disciplines. Who do you think, if we're building the perfect MMA fighter?
Max Holloway.
Max Holloway for best boxing. Perfect. Best leg kicks.
Jose Aldo.
Best wrestling.
Ooh, I'm going for Chris Weidman.
Best jiu-jitsu.
Oh, man, best jiu-jitsu. I'm going with Ryan Hall.
And best fight IQ.
John Jones. You got to go with John Jones. I mean, for a second there, Izzy Adesanya was like, but fight IQ, as long as he's been champion and been in the UFC for so long, it's got to be John Jones. It's got to be John Jones.
I'll tell you what, that would make for one sick MMA fighter, right?
100%, man.
Oh, man.
100%. That, I mean, with John Jones' IQ, Chris Weidman's wrestling, this guy's the strongest dude I've ever seen in my life. The Ryan Hall's jiu-jitsu, it's like, I've grappled with this dude. I know I'm physically stronger. I'm more athletic. I'm bigger than him. He plays with me. It's ridiculous. And then Jose Aldo's leg kicks. And I was in between Jose Aldo and Barbosa, but I went with Jose Aldo. And then what was the boxing? Max Holloway's boxing. Come on. Unbeatable.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, Stephen, like I said at the beginning of our conversation, this is precisely why I launched my show. I've never really had an opportunity to have an extended conversation with you. I feel like I can talk to you for hours on end, but I want to be completely respectful of your time. Michel Pereira in the works. You know, a few bout agreements need to be signed at this stage when we're talking, but it looks like all roads are leading to you back in the octagon on June 10th in Vancouver. I can't wait. Best of luck. And I love seeing a comeback story. I would love to see you once again just have the opportunity to fight for the title. And if that's meaning you have to earn it or become a backup fighter, I just want to. And also, I think you and Leon would be an incredible stylistic matchup as well. So I do really hope that you get that opportunity, my friend.
I appreciate it, brother. And always enjoy hanging out with you. Hope we can do it again soon sometime.
Hell yeah, anytime. Stephen, take care, my friend, and we'll speak to you soon.
You got it, brother. Have a good one, sir.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Smack Talk with Sandhu. It really means a lot to me. And hey, listen, if you enjoyed this episode, please go and give it a follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your shows.